Meaningless, meaningless, utterly meaningless, says the teacher, a chasing after the wind. Those words of Solomon over 20 years ago in my life, I found myself a baby Christian, deep in depression, seeking relief, seeking acceptance and satisfaction through alcohol and sex and relationships and school and friends, money, anywhere I could. I grew up in a good, hardworking, typical dysfunctional American family. Faith was something important. It was something good people did, but not really us. The God, the little g God of our family, was financial success, and being a successful provider was the ultimate goal. And as I began my journey as a baby Christian, I still was living in that house. I still was living in the world, and I was slowly learning, but I was seeking happiness still through sexual relationships and financial gain and popularity and just being accepted. I was so lonely. The list just went on and on. And my depression, my anxiety, utter hopelessness just continued to grow. Even though I was falling deeper in love with Jesus, my depression and anxiety and just hopelessness continued to grow. Nothing seemed to satisfy. Then one day, suicidal, I picked up the Bible, which I was doing, and I read the book of Ecclesiastes. Now that might seem strange, but depressed and suicidal reading the book of Ecclesiastes, but I read the words, riches are meaningless, pleasures are meaningless, wisdom meaningless, everything is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Something really interesting began to happen as I read those words from thousands of years ago. It was as if my journey was being laid bare in front of me, as if Solomon knew what my heart was going through, that he had walked the same road as me, that he had done it, but with even more vigor, even more wealth, even more pleasure, more success, more knowledge, more wisdom, more experience than I could ever dream. And he had also come up empty and depressed. And then I came to the conclusion that he wrote that it was utterly meaningless, a chasing after the wind, that it would never satisfy, that nothing would satisfy. And I took out my Bible and I highlighted his statement after statement, and it resonated with my heart over and over again like never before. And then I got to Solomon's conclusion of it all, and it said this, and by these, my son, and it was as if he was speaking to me in that moment, be warned. There is no end to making of many books, and much study wearies the body. When all has been heard, the conclusion of the matter is this: fear God and keep his commands, because this is the whole duty of man. Fear God and keep his commands. Fear God and do what he says. That's the answer. But yes, something was stirred inside of me. Like, it was almost like one of those cartoon light bulb light up moments. That the path of my family, that for generations of seeking financial wealth, of acceptance and notoriety and just sustainability, being okay, security financially, was not the answer. That a relationship, no matter how good, was not going to be the answer. That a substance or a pocket full of cash was never going to satisfy. That they would all end up empty. That his conclusion was that it wasn't about me, that it was about God. that the purpose of my life wasn't going to be fulfilled through any of these things, no matter if they were good or bad, that I was going to find my place empty inside if I kept seeking that my true place was going to be in the middle of the will of the Father. And that if I would recognize him as the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, and just do the next faithful thing, no matter how I felt inside, no matter how far it took me from my own personal desires or the goals of my family, that I would find myself in the middle of his will and I'd find my meaning there. And something strange began to happen. The words on those pages became a mantra in my early journey. Meaningless, meaningless, utterly meaningless, says the teacher. A chasing after the wind. Toil is meaningless. Wealth is meaningless. Sexual pleasure is meaningless. A chasing after the wind. It wasn't going to satisfy. It was going to end up empty. I would say those words when my desire would lead me in this direction, and then it began to redirect, chart a new course in my life. And rather than what I wanted to be satisfied, what I wanted to achieve, simply what did God want? What was his will? He is in charge. And in my codependency, I began to realize that my fear of failing my family, of not achieving what they saw as success, or failing my dreams, that my fear of that it was needing to be put to death, because it was nowhere near the fear of disappointing God. And what amazed me is the more I surrendered to him and surrendered saying, God, you've got this, you know what's right, the more the depression lifted, the more meaning and purpose my life had. So I thank God for the tough words of Solomon all those years ago. Meaningless, chasing after wind. Because hearing those words and understanding the importance of fearing God changed my life. It rescued me, lifted me out of that depression, and changed the whole trajectory of my life. It was as if Solomon was speaking to me. He understood my journey, and that it wasn't going to satisfy, and that I needed to surrender it to God to live a full, abundant